Hello, welcome. This is Managing in the Moment. I'm so excited that you're here. This is the weekly show, as always, that is brought to you by Improv EQ, team building, and management coaching. And find out all kinds of things that you can about kind of employee engagement. Visit improveq.org. I am your host, Betsaida LeBron. I'm a team building strategist and management coach. I am really excited for the show that we have today. As always, this is for you if you are a people manager, if you supervise and support people and are looking for ways to do that more effectively, are looking for things that you can be thinking about and implementing right away, and you're looking for some actionable things. The idea of how you manage in the moment, right? This is a different moment than it's been before, and things are changing and quickly. So there's a lot of stuff that I want to make sure that you have. I know that the job of being a manager is not easy, and I want to support you. And that's what the show is really all about. And I am so fortunate in being able to interview lots of guests in the show where we talk about the things that managers need to be kind of thinking about from different angles. And so today I get to share with you this interview that I had with Jeff Harry. And Jeff Harry is wonderful. He's so much fun. I mean, you're going to see that we have such a great time in this conversation. And he really combines positive psychology and play to help teams and organizations create psychologically safe workplaces, and really helps individuals address their biggest challenges by embracing a play-oriented approach to their work. And what's great is we really talk about how this kind of play mindset and just the mindset that you need to have in general to step into having difficult or uncomfortable conversations, which are such a necessary part of managing people and working as a great manager. So enjoy the conversation that we have, and I will see you on the other side of this video. Excellent. Hi, Jeff. Thank you so much for being on the show. So happy to have you.
Hey, thanks so much for having me.
Yeah. So we were talking, and kind of, I think the thing which would be surprising for people who are just watching this and see what you do and what I do, and so based in play, that they might assume that we're super playful people, and that has nothing to do with having serious and or difficult conversations. So just to kind of put that out there right away is kind of why does what we do make it so that we actually can have serious and difficult conversations? I think people wouldn't think that. They think play, and then there's a place for play, and that none of that makes sense with how you interact with people. So I just want to give us a chance to kind of address that right up front before we get into it.
Yeah, sure. So, I ran a, Lego inspired STEM organization for like 15 years as a manager. So as a middle manager and then a, upper level manager. And I realized the more that we were willing to embrace play, especially when it comes to having that difficult conversation, the easier it actually was. And it's interesting. It's like the more hard conversations you have, the easier those conversations are to have. But I think what happens is we don't say anything for a really long period of time. And then we build up to one, home run conversation that's going to solve everything. And it puts so much pressure on managers to have to figure it all out. When really, if we were just having conversations with transparency the whole time, it wouldn't be as difficult.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, and I absolutely love how you said that. Just kind of, there is that that kind of all-encompassing big conversation where it's like we haven't dealt with it, and now it's this giant snowball because we just weren't dealing with it the whole time. And for me, just so you know, and I don't know if some of the viewers know, I used to run a crisis line here at the California Youth Crisis Line. So I started also as a line staff, and then was a middle manager, and then was actually the program director for the whole statewide agency. And so there's a lot of opportunity there where you would think play has no place in crisis, but that was one of the biggest kind of helps to what we were doing, is to help us get through some of these really hard crisis situations, is to have play, which is different than humor, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I would even say, I've been saying this a lot on interviews now, is it's like, play is what got us through the pandemic, right? Play is what's going to navigate us through all this uncertainty. You attempting to be a manager using pre-pandemic solutions is not going to go well. It's just not, because we're in a whole different world. And I think, managers are in such a difficult situation. I have such admiration for, the middle manager, right? Who like got promoted, never got the support, rarely got training, now has to keep all this staff are leaving, and they may not know why, or they may not know how to stop it, right? Because now this great resignation is like added up to like 20.5 million jobs just like gone, right? Or just people just quitting. And this idea of play, I define play as any joyful act where you forget about time. It has no purpose. It has no result. You are fully in flow. You're like doing the thing that fully makes you come alive. And I say that in this context for managers of like, what is the work that you are doing that is actually making you come alive, and that you like feel compelled with? But more importantly, do you know what your staff's way in which they do their flow work or their play work or their zone of genius work? Because if you don't know that, then no wonder so many people are leaving. So I think that's one of the first conversations we need to have, right? Two questions I'm constantly telling managers to ask is like, did we build trust or did we lose trust during the pandemic, right? Like, what happened? What did we do? Because a lot of trust was broken, but a lot of people didn't say anything. An example of that is, I know a teacher that left after 25 years at that school because they forced him to come back into work before there was a vaccine available. So right at that moment, it was just like, I don't care about your life. I care more about you getting work done for us. So we have to ask that question, did we build trust or lose trust during the pandemic? And then the second question to ask is like, what is your staff's zone of genius work? And are you supporting them in doing that? And that ties all in with the idea of play.
Absolutely. Yeah. Your definition of play is really similar to mine, where, I think about play as a mindset, right? Where it's something that
Mm-hmm.
we do. And you talk about where you kind of can lose track of time. And I just think of it as something that is internal versus external. So if someone's
Yes.
telling you to do it, then it's no longer play. And also the piece that like played isn't childish. I think a
Yeah.
lot of times people think of play, they can only assume, oh, okay, well, like, oh, okay, then I have to get out, my blocks or my color pencils or play in a sandbox. When like, I love how you talk about play really is when you're in that flow,
Yeah.
and how when people can be there, you can build trust quicker. And that is, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, because I also add that play is the opposite of perfection, right? Perfection is rooted in ego and shame and constantly trying to be right. Right now, we have no idea where we're going. So nothing's right. Nothing is the correct way, right? So, while play is rooted in curiosity, experimentation, constantly failing. And a lot of managers, I think, aren't allowed to fail. But if you're able to like take on that play oriented mindset and try out many different ways in which to engage your staff, you're probably going to be more successful. Now, you said something that was actually really important, which is I don't believe play is forced fun, right? Like I'm not, like, I did team building events for like 10 years. I ran them for like top tech companies. Putting Chad in a room with Samantha in an escape room and then thinking they're going to be happy when they come out and they're all friends. No, I'm just not about that anymore, because like, that's not play, because you're forcing people to connect when they're not even ready. If you haven't built trust, if you haven't built the playground for people to play in, and people trust one another and trust you as a manager, you shouldn't be forcing them to play at this point. What we're saying is more embracing a play-oriented mindset, which is like, you need to start experimenting. You need to be open to failure, and you need to be trying things out that you've never tried before, because again, pre-pandemic answers is not going to be the solution.
Yeah. And that's a perfect segue, actually, because I think one of the reasons, we're going to be talking about having difficult conversations as a manager, and one of the things that keeps people from having these conversations is the fear of failing,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
that's huge. There's a lot of fear around conversations that can be perceived as difficult, or you don't really know what's going to happen, or you don't have the words. So we're just going to kind of talk about a couple different conversations that managers really can be thinking of, just and really not specifically, because I don't want anyone to walk away from this having like, oh, these are words, this is how I have to address it, right? It's
Yeah.
more of like the mindset, how you want to go into having a potentially uncomfortable or difficult conversation, how you want to stay engaged in that conversation, and then ultimately how to end those conversations. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah. A friend of mine, Eric Bailey, wrote a book called "Cure for Stupidity," and one of the best questions or one of the best phrases he said is like, you either go into a conversation to be right or, to understand, right? And most of the time, we go into conversations to be right or to communicate something, and then have people being like, yes, you are correct. Thank you. And then they leave. And that's not what we're trying to do right now. Right now, all conversations that managers should be having with their staff is just trying to understand their perspective. Right now, according to McKinsey, a great attrition report, 40% of people are considering leaving their jobs in the next 3 to 6 months. Have you had that conversation? Are you even comfortable enough to have that conversation with your staff? Is your staff even comfortable enough to actually tell you instead of just
right.
lying? Right? So you have to just start having conversations on the regular with staff, just to be like, hey, I know this has been a difficult year or a difficult 2 years, and I understand a lot of people are leaving companies right now. Is that something you're thinking about doing? And listen, if you are, I completely understand. And if you need me to write a recommendation letter, awesome. I'm happy to do that. But let's start to have that conversation. We did that in the past when I was working in a former organization. And by simply saying that to the person, like, hey, we're all about helping you get your dream job, which we know is not here. By us helping him get that job, he eventually came back and worked for us again,
And
because there was
I've heard,
more loyalty with us being
yep,
willing to let go
yes.
of the results, right? Let go of the process and just be open.
Which is like, that's such a play mindset. Is like, it's not about the outcome, it's what we're doing right here, right now. We're taking care of
Mm-hmm.
each other. And I've heard that from not just that, but other examples of where that happens, where people leave and they think that they're going to another opportunity, and it turns out for whatever reason it's not the right fit culturally, the vibe, and they come back. And if you have that relationship, it not only do they come back, oftentimes they also recommend other really great people to join the team. And so even if they leave, sometimes people leave and you still like have them referring other people to that organization that they no
Yeah.
longer even work at, because that support was there.
Yeah, staff simply want managers to care about them outside of what they can do for them, right? Like, outside of you using me, I understand that I'm working for your organization, but do I need to feel used? Like, so many staff that I've talked to, right? And I've made so many videos now about this, of like, they feel used, they feel exploited, they feel taken advantage of, they feel not valued, they feel not compensated. And so many managers and companies are looking for the transactional solution. Like, what do you want? More pay? What do you want? Better benefits? They're looking for, and it's not just transactional, it's relational. It's just like, how have you treated me as a human being? Have you even treated me as a human being? What does that actually look like? I would ask that to managers, right? What does it look like right now to treat your staff, with a certain level of shared humanity, compassion, and empathy, right? Did you check in on them during the pandemic about either issues they were dealing with physically or mentally or with their family? A lot of people died. We have not even talked about that. There has not even been a mourning process. So people are really now rethinking, like, what's my purpose? Why am I here? And if that manager could communicate to them, hey, I care about you, and part of my purpose is to make this as an enjoyable place for you to work as possible, that's more likely to keep me than any other transactional thing you offer me. Because if you offer me more pay, if it's still the same toxic environment, I'm out.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and it, and there's, I think one of the studies that came out earlier this year was like employees ranked what mattered to them, and
Mm-hmm.
like the pay wasn't even in the top three. Like people will
Exactly.
take less pay if they're in a place where they really love being. They understand that, not every company has unlimited pockets.
Yeah.
Um, and so that's not the only way that companies can really attract and keep people. That's so true.
And I'm making a talk right now for nonprofits, basically telling them like this is a once in a century opportunity for you to bring in talent from the private sector that you never had a chance to before, because you have humanity, you have
Yeah.
shared purpose, you are actually doing good in the world. And I remember a friend of mine just joined an organization, and when she arrived, they had a pill, they had made a blanket for her. They had got her a Starbucks gift card. They had gotten her like, I don't know, lunch for some place. Really small stuff, like less than I don't know, like $40. But she was so happy with it. So happy because they took the time. Oh, and they all wrote on a letter just welcoming her to the new organization. It doesn't take a lot. It just takes effort and humanity.
Yeah. It, which, is kind of the basis of like, so really to have any difficult conversation, it it kind of starts way before the conversation,
Yeah.
right? We're talking about like all of that foundation of trust and human relationship that you have. And that then when you have these difficult conversations, like that's what it's then built on versus I've treated you like a cog and you're just, here to execute some function. And then
Yeah.
when there's a problem, I treat you like I'm just doing some sort of diagnostic check.
Yeah.
That is going to make the conversation much more uncomfortable for both sides. And so I think that's kind of what we're saying here, right?
Well, also think about, as a manager, think about, when do you call your staff? Is it only to ask them about their problems? Is it only to correct them on something? If that is your relationship right now, you got to change that. Because
Yeah.
every time you call, guess what? They get that feeling in the pit of their stomach of like, ugh, my manager's calling me again. Ugh, it's
That
Friday at
Pavlov.
4. It's
Yeah.
Friday at 4:55. Why is he calling me now? Ugh. And it's just like, just start having conversations with them like, hey, let's just catch up. I remember a friend of mine, he's a manager at a tech company, and during the pandemic they would just have meals together. That was the only meeting that he would have, like a few times a week, where they would just eat and hang out and talk about nothing about work. And that
Yeah.
helped tremendously in keeping the connection and the community and that culture word that everyone's like trying to hold on to, but it's not like willing to put in the effort. The effort is you having 3 conversations with your staffer before the difficult conversation, where you simply are trying to understand what challenges they're going through, how you can support them, and what can you do. Oh, Priya Parker asked this. What can you do to help your staff do their most vibrant work? That's what you should be
Yes.
asking yourself.
Yeah. And I think absolutely. And then just that for managers who are watching, that starts well before there's a problem. And that really you're talking about all the things like who they are as a person. And but also I think that the piece that we haven't said yet is highlighting when things are going really well,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? Because there's a lot of times, and depending on the kind of person you are, I know like for me, I call myself a recovering perfectionist. um, I am quick to dismiss the things that I've done well because it wasn't my
Mm-hmm.
idea of perfect, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so having someone who's a manager or someone that I, admire who is, telling me, hey, this was really good, that makes me pause and then take account of that. I think that's really important for managers to acknowledge not just the problems and the humanity outside of work, but the good things that are happening at work. Like, hey, I really appreciate when you're proactive and
Mhm.
you started that conversation, you asked questions that nobody else at the table was thinking. Like, thank you.
Yeah, I've been thinking about the idea of perfectionism, and my friend Angie Cole said something to me that I was really fascinated by. Because what is perfectionism? Your main goal is to look for all the problems in you and others. That's it, like all the time. So at no point can you be happy. Because, and even when everything is perfect, you're still not happy, because it's just like, well, thank goodness, at least we were perfect this time, right? So
Because
it's
it doesn't
such a
end.
sad, like world. It's so limiting, right? And the idea of catching them doing good, oh my gosh, you're actually catching them doing good. You're Imagine calling your staff the next 4 times you speak to your staff and you have nothing to correct them on. Oh my goodness, that would change everything for that staffer. They'd be like, I don't know why he's being so nice to me. Like, because we haven't been doing that. And this is part of the humanity part of just like, it's interesting that we put so much onus on, oh, well, my upper level manager just contacted me and said that your staffer messed up. So now I'm going to call him up and I'm going to dump all this bad energy on them. And we really have to be thinking from like an energy standpoint of like, how much good energy am I giving to my staffers, and how much negative energy am I giving? So
Yeah.
yeah,
I mean,
what's the answer to that, manager?
well, yeah, each of you have to think about that. And you bring up another really good point, is that I think a good manager also in some ways is a bit of an energy buffer,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because sometimes things do come down, and as a manager, you have an opportunity to not just dump that on your people.
Yep.
You have an opportunity to kind of like, okay, like that's true, you can hear it, but then not like immediately, like you said, dump it out on them.
Well, I
um
mean, not only that, but just like that's just trauma. It's it's your job to be the shield, right? To be the filter. Your upper management might be like, well, someone's going to get fired if this doesn't get done. That's not what you communicate to them, right? This is where we have to like translate and understand. And I talk about this with managers all the time. You have to understand your staff's languages of appreciation. What motivates them? Oh, are they motivated by gifts? That means bonuses. Figure out how you can compensate them. Same thing with words of affirmation. If you are giving, praise to your staff, not just within the department, but outside the department, just in case they want to transfer in the future, that again motivates them, because they're like, oh, wow, they're looking out for me, even if it doesn't help them, right? Even if it
right.
doesn't help that manager, they're still going out of their way, and then like the other idea of like acts of service. If you're like, hey, I know something's going on with your family right now. I know you're going through a lot of stuff. Let me take over some of your work so you can go home early on Friday, right? That act, just doing that once a month, huge rewards for doing that. Because again, you are looking out for your staff. The staff knows you have their back. The staff knows that you're doing right by them.
Right. And so much of this is about understanding the relationship that you have with them, and having these continual conversations where you're having opportunities to check in with them about work, about life, and that it's an ongoing thing. I think I a little comedy video a while back ago about like the annual review,
Oh,
and
yeah.
how, right, like it's the thing that, like, I'm taking notes of all the things you're doing wrong, but I'll tell you at the annual review. And I just think like one of those things is like, don't hold back the communication. I feel like it should be something that we over communicate, and to have these conversations also as a manager. I think you have to be asking for feedback and not just giving
Yeah.
feedback.
Yes, absolutely. And the annual review part's so interesting because uh you you should be able to say when you're about to do the annual review, we've already talked about this.
Yeah.
And if you are not saying that and you have not talked to them a lot, and this is like a big deal, the annual review is a big deal, you're not talking to your staff enough. That's just it. You're just not talking
Yeah.
to them enough. Well, what do you mean I'm not talking to them enough? That means they don't know how well they're doing. People want to know how well they're doing, and also would love to be able to give you feedback. And it doesn't have to be the 360, review, but like, when was the last time you asked them, what can I be doing better? How can I be supporting you? What am I doing right now that is preventing you from sharing, certain stuff? Is there anything that you would like to say to me, but you are scared to say? Are you having any of those conversations? Are you asking any of those questions? And if you're not, then that's the relationship you have. You already know that you have that relationship. And the question for you, which is a really hard question, is, do you want to change it? And if you want to change it, what are you willing to do to change it?
Right. And because you can't work with someone and expect to get these like positive results, especially when we're talking about difficult conversations, when you don't really have a relationship with them.
Yeah.
It's going to be so much harder, and just honestly, it'll feel icky.
Yeah.
When you try to get deep with someone that you don't really know.
Yeah. Yeah, it's almost like the parent that runs over to the playground to all the kids. Is everybody having fun? Hey, is everyone here having fun? You're just like, it's like, you don't even know anything about me, and then you're like destroying anything around that. But Port, I read today that said that 87% of people know what to do, just don't know, just have not done it, right? Like, I know what I need to do to be healthy and lose weight, but I'm not doing it, or I'm not. And that's the same thing with, you as a manager, you know what you need to do.
Yeah.
But you are scared to do it. So then how do you actually do it? This is what I recommend. This is why I run a whole workshop on difficult conversations. It's just like, you need to start practicing these out. So even if you are not ready to have that conversation with your staffer, then you need to start practicing either with your manager or with one of your colleagues and be like, I need to start having harder conversations with my staff. Would you be willing to do a role play with me? Because the more we actually do it, the more we embody those feelings of discomfort, the more we realize what fear is. It's just false evidence appearing real. And then we don't psych ourselves out that we can't have that conversation. Oh, I can never have that conversation with my staffer. Well, you can.
Yeah. And it also kind of goes with the idea of just that playful mindset, because the first time you do it, it's not going to be perfect. It will never be perfect, because as we said, that's not a real thing. Perfection it's not a thing you can actually grasp. And so just to give yourself kind of that like permission to it's going to be, I used to tell, I would tell managers as they're thinking about how they talk through things, the first time you say something, it's going to be kind of ugly. And the more you practice, the more polish it gets. It's not going to come out a diamond the first time. So I love this idea of you have to practice and find who you can practice with.
Well, my friend Tanya Katan always says, she uses a different word, but it's like crappy first draft. Have the crappy first draft. Have the crappy first draft of this conversation. And you can even preface it as listen, I know we haven't connected. I know we haven't had the best relationship. I'm trying to improve that. I'm going to make mistakes along the way, but let's try to see if we can figure this out, starting with this conversation right here. Right? Let's start to frame stuff. And then again, let's stop trying to be so perfect, because you're not going to get it perfect. And perfection sucks anyway. You don't want perfection.
And they don't want perfect.
You can't have connection if you're striving for perfection.
And they don't want perfect either. I don't want to work for someone who's seemingly untouchable perfect. Like, I want to work with humans.
Right, right. And the idea that, think about it, if you are pursuing perfection or you have this belief that your staff thinks you're perfect right now, right?
Right.
What type of burden does that put on you, right? You
Huge.
always then have to show up. Then they always have to show up with perfection. You always have to show up. Everyone is pretending. This is part of the reason why I wear this stupid bow tie, to remind myself that, like, we're all wearing costumes, right? And the more we're willing to, like, lift that veil of BS and be like, sometimes I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm figuring this out just like you. We're in the trenches together. I don't know how the company is doing financially, but I'm going to be here. And I hope you're going to be here with me. And I'm willing to do whatever you need to keep you here. But I understand if you got to go. When you are having conversations like that, or willing to have conversations like that, you can build loyalty pretty quickly. But at the same time, if your actions don't match your words, you can lose trust in a moment.
Yeah, that is. I think that's kind of where we're going to end it. That is that is a whole word dropped. This is great, and thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah. So I know we ran just a little bit long, but it was such a good conversation. It was hard to kind of cut it off, and so um, just encouraging you to build those relationships, and that everything that you are doing, to have these conversations, there's no way for them not to be smooth every time, but when they're built on a relationship, that there's trust and open communication, it definitely makes some of this easier. So if you have any questions, you can reach out to me, Betsaida LeBron, at improveq.org is where you can find me. You can also find more information on Jeff in the comments and in the description of this video, as well as on Rediscover Your Play is the name of his company. Rediscoveryourplay.com is where you can find more information about Jeff. So I hope that you enjoyed this conversation and learned something. I know I had a great time and learned some things getting to chat with Jeff. And this will be the last show of the year. This is the last Managing in the Moment for December 2021. So we'll see you back in 2022. And so I hope that you enjoy the end of the year and have some time to just reflect with yourself. And I'll see you next year.